We are very fortunate to be joined by Dr. Joshua Kurz from Global Studies Program. Welcome, Dr. Joshua. Perhaps we could introduce yourself.
Sure. I am a lecturer in the sociology department and with the Global Studies Program. In fact, 6 years ago, when I first joined NUS, I was brought in for the Global Studies Program. So that's primarily what I do. I'm originally from the United States. I do some of my own work around issues of refugees and representation, in particular photography. But I also do work on more policy-oriented issues around refugees and immigration, sort of with a global focus, and in particular, just sort of looking at the ways that states have changed their bordering practices in order to prevent people from getting to their borders as a way of deterrence and border enforcement. So I've looked at those kinds of things. Teaching-wise, I tend to teach, I teach the introductory level course for Global Studies, 1101E, but I also teach a number of courses on global cultures, and then with the, with the sociology department, I teach on popular culture as well.
Thank you so much. While waiting, for those of you who have joined us, please log on to paulf.com/FASS live webinar. On your screen, you will see our QR code. Do use your mobile phones, and you can do a quick flash and log in. So, okay, you can log into the questions. Actually, I see one question already. So, Dr. Kurz, if you don't mind, maybe I'll fire away. Would pursuing political science with a focus on comparative political systems and international relations be equivalent to the Global Studies Program? What are your thoughts?
No, I think the thing that makes global studies distinctive from political science and international relations is the way that we understand the state and the role of the state. In political science and international relations as sort of a subfield of political science, the primary question is always about the question of the state. What is the role of the state? And certain questions like the legitimacy of the state. International relations theory is all about how states interact with one another. Global studies takes some of that on board and sort of says, okay, well, when states are important, we do take insights from international relations to try to understand them. But the primary question for global studies is always first and foremost processes and dynamics of globalization. And sometimes the state is not the most important actor. Sometimes it's not even an actor. And we don't then filter everything through the theories of international relations, which were really constructed about how states work with one another, how they interact, how they have self-interest or not, and so on and so forth. So you could actually understand global studies and chart your way through global studies and actually engage the state very minimally. You can look primarily at things like civil society. You can look primarily at cosmopolitan philosophies rather than state-oriented philosophies. So it's really, first and foremost, that question of the state that distinguishes political science and / international relations with global studies.
Thank you so much. Next question is this. I read that global studies is not offered as a second major. But does this not affect anything if it is taken as a first major, correct?
Yeah, so the reason why global studies has to be taken as the first major is simply because the number of core modules that you have to take is just a little bit more than most other majors. And then especially in the fourth year, you have to take a sequence of 4101, 4102. So the idea is that you really have to put those things first, otherwise you can't do the major. This has gotten a lot easier because we redesigned the curriculum a number of years ago to get rid of a few requirements. Nonetheless, it's still just fitting a few extra puzzle pieces together in your time here. It's not difficult. It's just there's a couple extra pieces and moving parts you have to consider. So as long as the second major that you're considering can be taken as a second major, then there should be no conflicts at all. I believe any sort of conflicts may arise is that if our major, GL, and another major that you're interested in both can't be taken as a first major. But I don't think there are too many other majors at FASS that can't be taken as a first. Mm-hmm. And it's simply, I think, the number of core modules we have.
Thank you, Dr. Kurz. For those who have just joined us, please log in to paulf.com/FASS live webinar. Next question for you is, regions covers seems the same as what is covered under Asian studies. So how is this different?
Yeah, so one of the things that I mentioned is that we redesigned the curriculum a few years ago, and it used to be that you had to pick a theme and a region to sort of specialize in both. We no longer require you to do that. Now you have to pick a theme. But you do have to take a number of modules in area studies coded departments. And this is primarily to make sure that you get some geographical understanding of the dynamics of globalization, just rooted in actual places. The global studies core modules are very big in scope because you're talking about globalization, you're talking about big things, big dynamics, lots of actors. So the thinking is that you take those core modules, then you go and take some courses in, say, perhaps in geography, but also in Asian studies department or European studies department. And the thinking is that you get some idea about how these big global dynamics might be taking place in a more localized region. So you're not specializing in a region. If you're here from the PPE talk, Prof. Lloyd made a small mistake by referring to our old curriculum, which was at cohort 2017 or before. You no longer specialize in a region. You simply take a few modules in area studies coded departments so that you get some mix of the understanding of the global and the local interaction.
Next question. What is the difference between globalization in global studies and globalization in geography?
Well, I think the disappointing answer to that is it depends on who you ask. There are some of the geography professors who have a very similar understanding to globalization as I do. And then there's a couple others that don't really share that very much. For example, there's an economic geographer in the department who I think he's brilliant, but thinks about economic geography and globalization in a much more sort of narrow sense, where we tend to look at politics and economics and culture and social dynamics. He looks, for example, at the economics of geography, which today, of course, is global. He looks at global production networks and value chains, but he doesn't really care about culture, for example. He doesn't really care about politics unless it directly impacts the economics that he's talking about. So it's a non-answer. I know that, because defining global studies, we could be here for a year just debating the definition of globalization. But some ways to cut about and think about it is geography is not a unified discipline. There are different sub areas of geography, and so it kind of depends on who you ask.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Perfect segue to the next question, also about globalization. Is everything in global study about globalization?
Yeah, I got this comment once at the end of a first year class, the introduction class on global issues, where someone expressed a great deal of surprise that the class was about globalization. And so by definition, I think that the field of global studies is the academic study of globalization. So not every class that you take is going to confront that in the same way. 1101 is very expansive to get you introduced to kind of the broad dynamics of globalization. But then you enter a sequence of 2000 level modules where you look at the history of globalization, that's 2101. You look at economic globalization, 2102, and you look specifically at political or globalization, which is primarily about international institutions, 2103. And then later on, in some more specialized courses, you'll look at specific dynamics about cultural globalization or sociology of globalization, for example. So not everything confronts it in the same way, but your total experience in global studies is the academic study of globalization. So if you're not really interested in about globalization as the first thing, then maybe you're more interested in things like economics or political science, where you can focus on one country, whether it be Singapore or somewhere else, and sort of make that your thing. You know, there's no hard feelings.
Thank you. Thank you. The next question, I did see the video on global studies, but generally, if I were to major in this, what other disciplines do you think will complement with it?
Okay, I mean, I think all of the FASS disciplines would complement it very well. It depends on what you're interested in. One of the nice things that students have long been interested in about global studies is its relative flexibility. Last year, I had someone write an honors thesis that was essentially on world literature. She looked at diasporic literature. So she looked at the way that Chinese identity in two different literatures, in a Singaporean Chinese play and a Chinese American novel, and did a comparative analysis. But then I've had other students who have been interested in refugee patterns into Malaysia, have had interested in local dynamics of migration enforcement with the way that the migration system here works for construction workers, for example. So all of those things actually point to different ways to approach global studies. Some of them took more political science classes. Some of them took more humanities-oriented courses. Some students try to take more economics courses, but the trick with economics is that if you don't take the right prerequisites, what ends up happening is that you can't get into some of the later courses. So if you're interested in global studies and economics, plan ahead. But really, any of the FASS majors can complement it depending on what you're interested in.
Thank you. Thank you. Next question. If I were to read the GL1101E module, which basket will it count towards, since we have to clear one module from each of the three divisions?
Honestly, I have no idea. I know that if you're a GL major and you take 1101E, it counts as the 1101 class for the major. So I think that that's better suited question for someone who handles all the MCs on a regular basis.
Okay, sure, fair enough.
I don't know if maybe Ryan or Wesley are here still. Maybe they have a better answer.
Hi, John. I'd just like to clarify on this question. For GL1101E, it could be either counted towards your core faculty module requirement, or you can use it for your UE, your unrestricted modules, electives.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Ryan, for chiming in. Next question. What's the difference between pol science and global science?
I think I mentioned already, the big difference is the role and function of the state in the way that we approach our understanding. Every academic discipline has started to grapple with globalization, some as early as 30 years ago, some of which are really only coming to the fold now. The distinction, though, is that globalization is usually treated by most disciplines as a secondary thing, or an outside force, or a spoiling force. In global studies, we take globalization as the primary object of analysis.
Okay, very good. Thank you. GL3550, the Global Studies Internship. What is covered here, and at what stage should we be exploring this module?
So basically, the internship is, you go out and find yourself an internship. And then you have to generate an academic plan with an academic a faculty advisor. So you'll have an internship supervisor at your location. You'll have a faculty supervisor at NUS. And basically, there is an academic project that you undertake in agreement between you and your advisor, academic advisor. Usually it's something like an ongoing journal where you reflect on your experiences, and then say a final essay where you, in agreement, you pick some sort of topic that's relevant to the internship as well as global studies, and you write an essay about it. That's at the same time that, say, you're going to, well, you know, in a non-COVID world, you're going to an office every day and doing your internship duties. Of course, that can still happen. I have a number of students from my class just last semester who are actually doing internships right now. It's just that they're working remotely. So what it is an opportunity for you to get career experience, pursue some sort of interest, maybe with a non-governmental organization or a civil society organization, and then use that as an opportunity to bridge the gap between your academic learning in global studies and your experiential learning in the internship.
Nice, thank you so much.
Sorry, what stage? Sorry, what stage? I think there's a certain number of prerequisites you have to meet. I think you can start meeting those as early as your beginning of your second year. So I've had people who have been quick to get those and maybe did one in their second year or second into third year. And then I've had third and fourth year students as well doing.
Nice, thank you. Nice segue to the next one, quite relevant. What kind of career should I be looking at if I were to choose to major in global studies?
And global studies is relatively young. I mean, globally, global studies as a field is relatively young. Global studies at NUS is something like 7 or 8 years old. So we have had a number of cohorts graduate. And in fact, they're working in all sorts of things. We have people working in big multinational corporations, agricultural agricultural companies like Cargill. We have some people working in the more not-for-profit sector. So we have somebody that works for the World Wildlife Federation. And we kind of have something everywhere in between. We had a student who decided that, you know, for whatever reason, that sort of traditional job wasn't for her. She's now like a physical trainer, a fitness trainer. We have, and is quite happy about it, by the way, as far as I know, what she's told me. So we have people doing all sorts of things, regular sort of business type jobs, not-for-profit type jobs, and then also people working for the civil service. We have at least one graduate who is a career military serviceman. I think he flies jets for the Air Force. And we have a number of people who have entered various ministries. So really,
Nice.
it's kind of like, you kind of have an idea of what you want to do. You can use things like the internship to start building a pathway there. If you don't really know what you want to do, you can use some of the breadth of global studies and the fact that you can approach a number of different fields as a way to test out some things and say, well, do I like this? Do I not like this?
Can you tell us a bit more about the Capstone project?
So the Capstone project is called Task Force, and it happens over Sem 1 and Sem 2 of your 4th year. You have to be an honors student to take it. It is basically an attempt to sort of take all the things that you learn in your first 3 years and say, well, okay, where does the rubber meet the road here? What's the practical nature of this? So what the instructors do is work with community partners out in Singapore, sometimes not-for-profit organizations, sometimes businesses. And they basically say, okay, well, what are some things that you're dealing with that you'd like students to do a little bit of research on and offer you some solutions, right? So you end up sort of working with these organizations or businesses in a capacity where they're presenting you with real life issues saying, you know what, we're having a hard time with X or Y. And then you get to work on that by both doing some research, but then also turning it into policy proposals that you then present back to the organization or company, right? We've had a few people actually translate this into some careers, so this is good. It's more exposure to the career world. But for a lot of people, it's also an exposure to how public policy making works. And then some other people sort of think that it's just sort of, fun to do, and they do other things. So, but again, SEM 1 and SEM 2, they have to be taken in consecutive sequence. We do occasionally get students asking about whether they can take them out of sequence, but one course flows right into the other. You start the project in SEM 1, you complete the project in SEM 2. So that is something to think about if you're interested in doing exchange programs and things. They have to be done before your honors year.
Thank you. Next question, Dr. Kurz. Global studies majors develop expertise in a particular part of the world. Students are required to read a set of modules in a region of their choosing. What does choosing the region here mean? Okay,
so again, that's our old curriculum. And so if you're coming in now, you don't have a regional specialization. You do have to take some courses, a certain number of MCs, that are coded as area studies courses. So it could be Japanese studies, it could be European studies. It doesn't have to be Asian studies. We do have other regions. Because of the nature of NUS, we don't have a lot of courses that focus on North and South America, so that's a little bit harder to achieve. However, if you are very interested in a region, there's nothing stopping you from taking all of your area studies courses in one area studies department. Maybe you're super interested in Japan. You could take everything in Japanese studies. There's nothing stopping you, I don't think, from doing that. There is a clause as a global studies student that you can't take more than 50% of your modules within a department other than global studies. So you can't take all of your major classes in geography, for example. But if you're taking all of your different requirements and everything, and then you decide that you're going to fulfill your area studies requirement by doing nothing but Japanese studies, it's not enough credits to cross over that threshold, right? So the only thing is that now on your transcript, it does not reflect a regional expertise. Because frankly, it was not enough modules to claim a regional expertise, even in our old curriculum. So it was a little bit of an issue because it just wasn't enough credits to be able to say, I am an expert in globalization and this region.
Thank you, Dr. Kurz. We have about 5 minutes out to go. So perhaps let's respond to one more question. Why can global science double count with Chinese studies?
I don't know what that's referring to, because there are any number of modules at FASS that can potentially double count, but you can only maximally take a certain number of double counted modules. So for example, if you're a global studies student and you take a class in the Chinese studies department that fulfills your theme, but maybe your second major or maybe your minor is in Chinese studies, a certain number of modules can double count so that you can check 2 boxes off of your requirements. But there is a maximum number that you can do that. I don't actually know the number. So in that sense though, whatever your major is, you can have a certain number of courses double count as long as they're meeting the requirements for both a major and a minor or 2 majors or what have you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kurz. Ryan, would you like to chime in with anything in this regard, or?
Maybe what I can say is that for double counting, right? If you are double counting from a minor to your major, which is in this case, there's a maximum double count of 8 MCs. Just
okay.
That would be like 2 courses usually.
It's 2 modules.
So yeah, so I think in that sense, anything can kind of double count if it meets the particular kinds of requirements, but you can usually only do it for a max of two classes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Kurz. We are coming to the end of our first day of the freshman orientation. I was just wondering whether you have any final pearls of wisdom for our freshmen logged in, with us on this first ever e-orientation program.
Yeah, I mean, I know that a lot of students come in with this pressure to have your whole life figured out right now. And I would just say to use your first year and potentially even part of your second year to figure out what it is that you like to do. What do you like to think about? What can you imagine sitting in an office for the rest of your life doing? Because I think one of the most difficult things that I have to deal with as a teacher are students who come to me at the end of their fourth year, or sometimes even well after they've graduated, and said, you know what? I was so focused on getting A+ in everything, and I did a major that, maybe I was interested in, or sometimes maybe my parents were more interested in. And here I am 10 years later, and I've switched careers twice. I'm happy now, and I'm not doing anything related to what I did in school. We have a lot of societal pressure today to make college, to make university a training ground for your career. It's not. It's a place to learn how to think, how to live in the world, and how to be with other people who are not your parents. And those are important life skills, because the fact of it is, whatever you do when you graduate, 10 years later, those skills will be outdated. And even if you go back to school for more, schooling is always going to be chasing the business world. It's just the reality of it. We're never going to get ahead, right? So learning how to think, learning how to learn, learning what you love, and learning how to be with other people are far more important things to get out of your university education. That said, go for your A+. You still should do well in school.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for that very practical advice, which I'm sure our freshmen logged in will very much appreciate. Thank you so much, Dr. Kurz, for spending your late afternoon, early evening with us and guiding our freshmen who are very enthusiastic and know your global global studies program pretty well. Thank you so much.
If you need 1101, please let me know.
Yeah, thank you. So for the freshmen out there, thank you for spending your day with us. I hope that the various sessions have given you a chance to understand our various majors. And this morning's session with our dean as well as vice deans gave you a chance to understand the FASS undergraduate processes as well as curricula. We really hope this series of sessions were helpful to you. We are very sure you definitely will have more questions, and if you do not hesitate to reach out to our dean's office at 6516-6133 or drop us an email at fashelp@nus.edu.sg. The fun and the action doesn't end here. There's a second day, so we have day 2 planned all out for you. Tomorrow's sessions or focus on majors will be on the humanities and social sciences, and they will run from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Keep the Zoom link with you. You can log into the same Zoom link and keep the Paulette link with you as well. All your questions will be responded to through that platform, and do tune in tomorrow at 10 a.m. sharp at the Zoom link that you have used today. So thank you so much for spending your day with us. We wish you a good evening. Stay safe, stay healthy, all our best to your families, and we look forward to welcoming you to the FASS classroom, whether it's in the Zoom platform or otherwise.